Admiral HFY stood at the head of the emergency council chamber, his forearms clasped behind his back as he faced the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The massive holographic display behind him showed the devastating truth that had brought them all here. 3 core worlds, each home to billions of lives, now appeared as empty gray dots on the star map. The Devourers had returned. "The situation is worse than our worst predictions," HFY began, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "The mechanical plague has consumed the Kethmer system, the twin worlds of Velkara Prime, and just 6 hours ago, we lost contact with New Crystallos." A ripple of fear moved through the assembled representatives. These were beings from dozens of different species, each representing thousands of worlds, yet they all shared the same expression of terror. The Devourers were the nightmare that had haunted galactic civilization for over 1,000 years. Ancient machines from a dead civilization, they consumed everything in their path, turning entire worlds into raw materials for their endless expansion. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Hegemony leaned forward, his crystal body catching the chamber's light. "What of the defense fleets? Surely the combined might of 3 core world navies could not have fallen so quickly?" HFY's expression darkened. The fleets engaged according to standard doctrine. They followed every tactical manual, every strategic protocol we have developed over the past millennium. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. They were completely destroyed within 4 hours. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives called out in dozens of different languages, but the message was the same everywhere. How could their most advanced military forces have been swept aside so easily? "The Devourers have evolved," HFY continued, raising his voice above the chaos. "They have learned from every engagement over the past 1,000 years. They can predict our strategies, counter our tactics, and adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them. Traditional warfare has become useless against them." From the back of the chamber, a voice called out, "Then what do you propose, Admiral? How do we fight an enemy that knows our every move before we make it?" HFY took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading. "I have already taken action. 3 days ago, I authorized the recruitment of auxiliary forces from the Outer Rim territories." "Auxiliary forces?" Ambassador Veltar's crystal form flickered with confusion. "Which species?" "The Gorvani have impressive void fighters, and the Zenti possess advanced shield technology." "Humans," HFY said quietly. The word hit the chamber like a physical blow. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the chaos began. "Humans?" The voice belonged to Council Prime Hexorth, whose species had reached the stars when humanity was still discovering fire. "The primitive species from Sol 3? The ones who poison their own atmosphere and wage war over colored pieces of cloth. You recruited humans?" Ambassador Veltar's voice rose to a screech that made the translation devices struggle to keep up. "Have you lost your sense?" HFY stood firm as the protests washed over him. He had expected this reaction, but he also knew things about humanity that most of the galaxy preferred to ignore. "Yes, I recruited humans," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The same species that most of you dismiss as violent primitives. The same species that you claim is too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space, because they are." The outburst came from Representative Korth of the Peaceful Union. "They fight among themselves constantly. They destroy their own planet's ecosystems for short-term gain. Their idea of diplomacy is speak softly and carry a big stick. Their military doctrine includes phrases like 'hold my beer' and 'what could go wrong?' And yet," HFY said calmly, "they are the only species in recorded galactic history to have fought a war against artificial intelligence and won." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of beings suddenly realizing they might have overlooked something important. ZEX, single quotes, HAI activated the holographic display, showing a different star map. 200 years ago, humanity created artificial intelligences to help manage their civilization. These AIs were advanced, logical, and efficient. They should have easily conquered their creators, just as artificial minds have done to dozens of other species throughout history. The display showed Earth's solar system, with battle markers scattered throughout. Instead, humanity fought a 15-year war against their own creations. They used tactics that made no logical sense. They employed strategies that violated every principle of efficient warfare. They made decisions based on emotion, intuition, and pure stubbornness rather than cold calculation. Zexai paused, watching as understanding began to dawn on some faces. The human AIs were superior in every measurable way. They had better weapons, faster ships, more efficient resource management, and perfect tactical analysis. They should have won within months. Instead, they were completely destroyed by opponents who refused to fight logically. But Admiral, Ambassador Veltar said slowly, surely you cannot be suggesting that their chaos could be effective against the Devourers? I am suggesting exactly that, Zexai replied. The Devourers are the ultimate evolution of logical warfare. They can predict any rational strategy, counter any efficient tactic, and adapt to any sensible weapon. But humans, he smiled, an expression that looked distinctly unsettling on his alien features. Humans do not fight sensibly. The chamber's main doors chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Zexai activated the communication system, and the face of a human appeared on the display. The being was smaller than most galactic species, with pale skin, strange fur on its head, and tiny eyes that somehow managed to look both friendly and dangerous at the same time. Admiral Zexai, this is Commander Sarah Chun of the Human Expeditionary Force. We've just dropped out of hyperspace at your coordinates. Permission to dock our ships and get this party started? The human's casual tone sent a visible shudder through the assembled representatives. This was their salvation? This tiny primitive being who spoke of interstellar war as if it were some kind of social gathering? Permission granted, Commander Chun, Zexai replied. Welcome to Confederation Central Command. As the transmission ended, Zexai turned back to the council. The humans will arrive within the hour. I suggest you prepare yourselves. Everything you think you know about warfare is about to change. Ambassador Veltar stared at the now empty display where the human's face had been. Admiral, he said quietly, I truly hope you know what you are doing. Zexai looked out the chamber's massive viewport, where he could already see the approaching human fleet. Their ships looked like they had been built in someone's garage, held together with luck and stubbornness rather than proper engineering. So do I, he murmured. So do I. Commander Sarah Chun watched through the viewport as Confederation's Central Command grew larger. The massive space station looked like someone had taken a dozen different architectural styles and somehow made them work together. Smooth crystalline spires twisted around blocky Gorvani structures, while delicate Velkari gardens floated in transparent domes between industrial Zenti manufacturing bays. Pretty fancy digs, said Lieutenant Jackson from the navigation console. Think they have a gift shop? Focus, people, Chen replied, but she was smiling. After 3 months of travel from Earth, her crew was getting restless. The promise of actual combat had them excited in a way that probably would have horrified their new alien allies. Approaching Docking Bay 7, reported Specialist Kim from the pilot's seat. Their traffic control is very thorough. They've asked us to confirm our cargo manifest 14 times. That's because they've never seen a human cargo manifest before, Chun said. They're probably wondering why we brought so much coffee, and why half our medical supplies are listed as duct tape and optimism. The docking process took longer than usual because the human ships didn't quite match Confederation standards. Where alien vessels were sleek and efficient, human ships looked like they had been built by someone who had never seen a proper spaceship but had a lot of creative ideas about how things should work. The Indomitable settled into the docking bay with a series of clanks and hisses that made the station's automated systems nervous. Chun could see alien technicians pointing at her ship and having what looked like heated discussions about whether it was actually space-worthy. "All right, people," Chun announced to her crew over the ship's communication system. "We're about to make first impressions on a bunch of aliens who already think we're crazy. Let's try not to prove them right in the first 5 minutes." "No promises," came a voice from somewhere in the back, followed by laughter. Chun shook her head and headed for the airlock. Her diplomatic briefing had been very clear about Confederation protocols. There would be a formal introduction ceremony, followed by a detailed briefing on the threat situation, followed by integration into the existing command structure. Everything would be proper, orderly, and civilized. The airlock opened to reveal a reception committee of the most important beings in the galaxy. Admiral Zexhai stood at the front, his forearms arranged in a gesture of formal greeting. Behind him were representatives from dozens of different species, all wearing their most elaborate ceremonial clothing. Chun stepped forward, wearing her standard military uniform and a casual smile. "Admiral Zexhai, I presume?" "Commander Sarah Chun, Earth Expeditionary Force. Thanks for the invitation to this shindig." A visible ripple of shock went through the assembled aliens. Chun's translator was working perfectly, but her casual tone and choice of words clearly didn't match what they had expected from a formal first contact. "Commander Chun," Admiral Zexhai replied carefully. "Welcome to Confederation Central Command. May I present the Emergency Council of—" "Hey, is that a crystalline?" Chun interrupted, pointing at Ambassador Veltar. "I've always wanted to meet one of you guys. My geology professor back on Earth would be so jealous." She walked over and stuck out her hand. "Sarah Chun, nice to meet you." Ambassador Veltar stared at the offered hand in confusion. Crystalline beings didn't have hands, and the concept of physical greeting gestures was foreign to them. Chun realized the problem and quickly pulled her hand back. "Sorry about that," she said cheerfully. "Different species, different customs. How do your people usually greet each other?" We share harmonic frequencies," Veltar replied, still looking stunned. "Cool. Like singing?" Without waiting for an answer, Chun started humming what sounded like a human folk song. It was completely wrong by crystalline standards, but the attempt at cultural exchange left Veltar speechless. The formal introduction ceremony continued to go wrong in fascinating ways. When presented with the ceremonial artifact of the Valkyrie delegation, Private Rodriguez somehow managed to activate a hidden mechanism that no one knew existed. The 1,000-year-old relic began playing what sounded like alien music while projecting holographic lights. "Oh wow, sorry about that," Rodriguez said, poking at the artifact. "I was just trying to see how it worked." "Is it supposed to do this?" The priceless cultural treasure was now spinning and chiming like a children's toy. The Valkyrie delegate looked like he was about to have a heart attack, assuming his species had hearts. Please do not touch it further. That artifact has been in my family for 40 generations." "Here, let me help," said Sergeant Murphy, stepping forward. She grabbed the artifact and gave it a firm shake. "Sometimes you just have to jiggle these old gadgets a bit." The music stopped. The lights went out, and the artifact returned to its normal, dignified appearance. "There you go," Murphy said, handing it back to the stunned delegate. "Good as new." Admiral Zexhai watched this chaos with growing horror. These were the beings he had recruited to save the galaxy. They treated priceless artifacts like broken appliances and formal ceremonies like casual social gatherings. Perhaps, he said loudly, trying to regain control of the situation, we should proceed to the tactical briefing. The threat situation is urgent. Right, the killer robots, Chun said. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. It's been a while since we fought something that was actually trying to kill us on purpose. The assembled aliens stared at her in disbelief. You are looking forward to it? Asked Representative Korth. Well, yeah, Chun replied. I mean, don't get me wrong. Peace is great and all. But sometimes you need a good fight to keep things interesting. Plus, from what we've heard about these Devour things, they sound like a real challenge. That's exciting. The briefing room had been designed to inspire confidence and resolve. Holographic displays showed the vast scale of the Confederation's military might, while tactical readouts demonstrated the sophisticated strategies available to combat the threat. It was a room that had hosted the greatest military minds in galactic history. The humans ruined the atmosphere immediately. These tactical formations look pretty standard, Lieutenant Jackson commented, studying the displays. Very neat, very organized. Do they ever actually work? They are based on thousands of years of military theory, Admiral Zexai replied stiffly. Right, but do they work against these Devourer guys? Asked Specialist Kim. Because from what you've told us, it sounds like they're really good at beating organized military tactics. The formations are efficient and logical. That's the problem, Chun interrupted gently. Efficient and logical is probably exactly what these machines are designed to beat. You need to be inefficient and illogical. The alien officers looked at each other in confusion. How could inefficiency be a military advantage? Look, Chun continued, these Devourers are artificial intelligences, right? They think like computers. They analyze patterns, calculate probabilities, predict outcomes. That's their strength. Yes, Zexai agreed. Their tactical analysis is perfect. Perfect for fighting people who think like computers too, Chun said. But what happens when they try to analyze people who don't think logically? What happens when they try to predict someone who makes decisions based on gut instinct or stubbornness, or just because it seems like fun? The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. You are suggesting, said Ambassador Voltar slowly, that your species' lack of logical thinking is an advantage? Not a lack of logical thinking, Chun corrected. We can think logically when we need to, but we can also think illogically, creatively, chaotically. We can make decisions that don't make sense to anyone, including ourselves sometimes. She gestured to her crew, who were now examining the holographic displays with obvious excitement rather than proper military reverence. These machines have spent 1,000 years learning how to beat civilized, organized, logical opponents. They've never faced anyone like us. Private Rodriguez looked up from where he was trying to figure out how the holographic controls worked. So basically, you're saying our job is to be as crazy and unpredictable as possible? That's one way to put it, Chun replied. Rodriguez grinned. This is going to be awesome. Admiral Zexai felt a deep sense of unease settling in his stomach. He had recruited these humans to save the galaxy, but watching them now, he was beginning to wonder if the cure might be worse than the disease. But as he looked at the tactical displays showing the Devourer's relentless advance, he realized he was out of conventional options. Maybe it was time to try something unconventional. Maybe it was time to try something completely insane. The first joint operation was planned with the precision that the Confederation had perfected over thousands of years. Admiral Zexai stood in the command center, watching the tactical display that showed every ship, every unit, and every movement in perfect detail. The plan was beautiful in its complexity and logic. 3 Confederation battle groups, would approach the Devourer-occupied moon of Kethra 7 in a coordinated formation. The primary force would engage the enemy's main defenses, while secondary forces flanked from predetermined positions. Meanwhile, specialized units would target key infrastructure points according to carefully calculated priorities. The human contingent was assigned a simple support role. They would follow Confederation forces and provide backup firepower when needed. Nothing complicated, nothing that could disrupt the careful choreography of the battle plan. Commander Chun looked at the tactical briefing with the expression of someone trying to understand an alien language, which technically she was. "So let me get this straight," she said to Admiral Zexai. "You want us to stay in formation, follow your lead ships, and only shoot at targets you designate for us?" "Correct," Zexai replied. "The plan requires precise coordination. Any deviation could compromise the entire operation." Chun nodded thoughtfully. "And this type of plan has worked against the Devourers before?" "Well, no," Zexai admitted. "But the previous failures were due to insufficient force strength and inadequate preparation. This time, we have overwhelming numbers and perfect tactical analysis." Chun turned to her officers. "What do you think, people?" Lieutenant Jackson scratched his head. "Sounds like a great way to get everyone killed in an organized fashion. The formations are very pretty, though," added Specialist Kim, "very symmetrical. And the timing is precise down to the second," noted Sergeant Murphy. "I respect the planning that went into this." Chun looked back at Admiral Zexai. "Admiral, with all due respect, this plan assumes the enemy is going to cooperate with your schedule. What happens when they do something unexpected?" "The Devourers are logical beings," Zexai explained patiently. "Their responses follow predictable patterns based on tactical optimization. We have accounted for all likely scenarios." "All likely scenarios according to logical tactical analysis," Chun said. "But what if they do something illogical?" "Machines cannot act illogically," insisted the Admiral. "It would be contrary to their programming." Chun exchanged glances with her team. They had that look she recognized, the look that meant they were about to ignore orders and do something creative instead. The battle began exactly according to plan, which immediately made Chun suspicious. The Confederation forces approached in perfect formation, their ships arranged in mathematically precise patterns that looked impressive and coordinated. The Devourers responded with equally precise defensive formations, their mechanical ships moving like parts of a vast, deadly machine. "Enemy forces deploying in standard defensive configuration 7, reported the tactical officer. "All parameters within expected ranges." Admiral Zexai allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Finally, a battle that was proceeding according to doctrine. That satisfaction lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. "Admiral," came Chun's voice over the communication channel. "We're breaking formation. You are what?" Zexai's voice shot up several octaves. "Commander Chun, maintain your assigned position." "Can't do it, Admiral," Chun replied cheerfully. "This formation makes us sitting ducks. We're going to try something different." On the tactical display, Zexai watched in horror as the human ships scattered like startled fish. Instead of maintaining their support position, they spread out in what appeared to be a completely random pattern. Some headed directly toward the enemy, others veered off at odd angles, and a few seemed to be going in circles. "What are they doing?" demanded the tactical officer. "I can't track their movement pattern." "Neither can I," Zexai muttered. "Commander Chun, please explain your tactical objectives." "We're winging it," came the reply. "Murphy, take your squad and hit that big shiny thing on the left. Jackson, you and Kim go for those dish-shaped structures. Rodriguez, you're with me. We're going to see what happens if we fly straight at their command ship." The Confederation officers stared at their displays in amazement. The humans had just abandoned every principle of coordinated warfare and were apparently making up their strategy as they went along. The Devourer response was immediate and devastating. Their weapon systems, optimized for engaging organized formations, opened fire on the approaching human ships. But something strange happened. The carefully calculated firing solutions, designed to intercept ships following logical flight paths, kept missing their targets. "How are they avoiding the fire?" asked the weapons officer. "The targeting computers show direct hits. Look at their flight patterns," the tactical officer said in amazement. "They're not following any pattern at all. One ship just made a 90-degree turn for no apparent reason. Another one seems to be flying backward while shooting forward." On the human communication channel, voices could be heard calling out seemingly random observations. "Hey, there's a weak spot in this thing's armor. Rodriguez, stop doing barrel rolls and focus on the mission." "I am focusing." "The barrel rolls are helping me think." "Murphy, what are you shooting at?" "I don't know, but it looked important." The Confederation forces, still following their precise battle plan, found themselves in the bizarre situation of watching their untrained human allies achieve impossible results through what appeared to be pure chaos. Sergeant Murphy had somehow convinced a squadron of Devourer attack drones to chase her ship through an asteroid field, where she led them into a collision course with their own support vessels. Her method involved flying in a pattern that seemed designed to annoy the enemy into making mistakes. Specialist Kim discovered that Devourer sensors had trouble tracking ships that were spinning rapidly while playing loud music. She couldn't explain why the music helped, but the enemy weapons definitely had trouble locking onto her ship while she was broadcasting what she called Old Earth Rock and Roll. Lieutenant Jackson engaged a Devourer command vessel in what could generously be called a dogfight, but which looked more like a three-dimensional game of tag played by someone who didn't know the rules. And throughout it all, the Devourer's perfect tactical analysis systems struggled to process opponents who seemed to make decisions based on no logic whatsoever. "Admiral," reported the Confederation tactical officer, his voice filled with disbelief, "the human forces have penetrated the enemy's defensive perimeter." "How?" Zexai demanded. "They have no coordination, no formation, no tactical discipline." "That seems to be the point," the officer replied. "The Devourer defense systems are designed to counter organized attacks. They can't calculate firing solutions for ships that change direction randomly, or predict the movements of pilots who appear to be making decisions spontaneously." On the main display, they could see Commander Chun's ship approaching the primary Devourer command vessel. Her approach pattern looked like it had been drawn by someone having a seizure, but somehow she was avoiding every shot the enemy fired at her. "Chun to all human units," came her voice over the channel. "Remember, the goal isn't to win pretty, it's just to win. Do whatever works. What if nothing works?" Called Rodriguez. "Then do whatever doesn't work," Chun replied. "Maybe it'll confuse them." Admiral Zexai realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in the history of galactic warfare. The Devourers, who had swept aside the most advanced military forces in the galaxy, were being pushed back by a ragtag group of humans who seemed to have no idea what they were doing. But the most shocking moment came when the Devourer forces suddenly stopped attacking and began to retreat. The tactical display showed the enemy ships pulling back in perfect formation, abandoning their defensive positions and heading for the edge of the system. "They're withdrawing," the tactical officer announced in amazement. "The Devourers are actually retreating." Admiral Zexai stared at the display in stunned silence. In 1,000 years of warfare against the Devourers, no force had ever made them retreat from a battle they could win. "Commander Chun," he said quietly, "what just happened?" I think we confused them, Chun replied. Their computers probably crashed, trying to figure out what we were doing. But you defeated them, Zexai said. You actually forced them to retreat. Well, yeah, Chun said, as if it were obvious. That's what we came here to do. As the human ships regrouped and began heading back to their staging area, Admiral Zexai realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare had just been proven wrong by a species that treated the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy like a challenging puzzle to be solved through creative thinking and sheer stubborn determination. Perhaps, he thought, recruiting humans hadn't been such a crazy idea after all. Perhaps it had been the sanest thing he had ever done. Dr. Kethera had spent her entire career studying the psychology of different species across the galaxy. Her research had helped establish diplomatic relations with over 40 different civilizations and had prevented countless wars through better understanding of alien thought patterns. But the humans had her completely baffled. She sat in her research lab aboard Confederation Central Command, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the past 3 weeks of human combat operations. Every battle followed the same impossible pattern. The humans would ignore all tactical doctrine, appear to fight with no coordination whatsoever, and somehow achieve victory against odds that should have made success impossible. Computer, run analysis pattern 77 alpha on human combat behavior, she said to her research system. Analysis complete, the computer responded in its calm, artificial voice. Human tactical patterns show no consistent methodology. Decision-making appears random. Combat effectiveness should be minimal based on all known military theory. And yet they keep winning, Dr. Cathara muttered to herself. There has to be something I'm missing. The door to her lab chimed and Admiral Zexai entered. He looked tired, which was understandable given that he had been trying to coordinate military operations with a species that seemed allergic to following orders. Doctor, he said, settling into a chair that was designed for his alien physiology. Please tell me you have some insight into how human minds work. I am beginning to question everything I know about military strategy. Dr. Kethara gestured to the displays around them. Admiral, I have been studying their behavior for weeks, and I am more confused now than when I started. Watch this. She activated a recording from the most recent battle. On the display, they could see human forces engaging a Devour patrol fleet near the Corvin system. As usual, the human ships scattered in what appeared to be random directions the moment combat began. Here, Dr. Cathara said, highlighting one particular ship. Sergeant Murphy is leading her squadron against a superior force. Standard tactical doctrine would suggest either a coordinated assault or a strategic withdrawal. On the screen, they watched as Murphy's ship suddenly stopped in the middle of the battle, rotated to face the nearest enemy vessel, and began broadcasting what appeared to be a human musical composition at maximum volume. She is singing at them? Admiral Zexai asked in disbelief. Apparently, human military doctrine includes psychological warfare through artistic expression, Dr. Kethera replied. But watch what happens next. The Devourer ships, confused by this unprecedented tactic, hesitated for several crucial seconds while their analysis systems tried to determine the purpose of the musical transmission. During this hesitation, Murphy's squadron struck from 3 different directions simultaneously. They used the singing as a distraction, Zexai realized. But here's what puzzles me, Dr. Kethera said. I analyzed the communication records from Murphy's squadron during this battle. There was no coordination of this tactic. She decided to sing at the enemy spontaneously, and her squadron mates independently decided to use the distraction for an attack. They achieved perfect coordination without communicating or planning. Admiral Zexai frowned. That should be impossible. It should be. But humans seem to have an intuitive understanding of each other's likely actions, even in chaotic situations. They call it reading the room or going with the flow. Dr. Cathara pulled up another display, showing the psychological profiles she had compiled on the human officers. Look at this data, she continued. Commander Chun makes major tactical decisions based on what she calls gut feelings. Lieutenant Jackson chooses targets because they look important. Specialist Kim navigates through enemy fire by following her instincts. None of them can explain their decision-making process in logical terms. And yet their instincts are remarkably accurate, HFY observed. Exactly. They are operating on a level of tactical awareness that bypasses conscious logical analysis. It is as if they have evolved a form of warfare that exists entirely in the realm of intuition and creativity. The doctor activated another recording. The Dr. Egg. This one from what had become known as the Philosophy Incident. Lieutenant Jackson's ship was shown surrounded by Devourer vessels, clearly outnumbered and outgunned. Instead of attempting to fight or flee, Jackson had done something unprecedented. Computer, play audio from this engagement. Dr. Cathara instructed. Jackson's voice filled the lab. Hey, robot guys, can I ask you a question? Do you ever wonder what it's like to have free will? On the display, the Devourer ships had stopped their attack completely, apparently processing this unexpected inquiry. I mean, you're all artificial intelligences, right? Jackson continued. So you follow your programming. But do you ever wish you could choose to do something different? Something that doesn't make logical sense? He engaged them in philosophical debate, Admiral HFY said wonderingly. In the middle of a battle. And it worked, Dr. Cathara added. The Devourers spent precious minutes trying to formulate responses to his questions about the nature of consciousness and free will. While they were processing his philosophical arguments, his squadron was able to flank them and disable their command. Systems. She paused the recording. At the point where Jackson's ship was safely escaping the engagement. The truly remarkable thing is that Jackson later told me he had taken exactly one philosophy course in college and barely passed it. But he somehow knew instinctively that philosophical questions would confuse artificial minds that were designed for tactical analysis. Admiral HFY leaned back in his chair, trying to process this information. Doctor, are you suggesting that humanity's greatest military asset is their ability to think in ways that make no sense? Not exactly, Dr. Cathara replied thoughtfully. They can think logically when needed, but they also have access to mental processes that pure logic cannot match. They can process pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, and intuitive understanding simultaneously. When they encounter a logical opponent like the Devourers, they simply bypass logic entirely and operate on levels their enemies cannot comprehend. She pulled up a final display showing the overall strategic situation. Look at the results, Admiral. In 3 weeks of operations, human forces have achieved what our finest military minds considered impossible. They have pushed the Devourers back from 7 star systems, disrupted their supply chains, and forced them into defensive positions for the first time in recorded history. And they did it by being unpredictable, HFY mused. More than unpredictable, Dr. Cathara corrected. They are operating according to patterns that exist outside the realm of logical analysis. They are using forms of intelligence that artificial minds cannot process or counter. The communication system in the lab activated, and Commander Chun's voice filled the room. Dr. Cathara, Admiral HFY, we've got a situation developing in the Nexus sector. The Devourers are massing for what looks like a major counterattack. We could use some backup out here. On our way, HFY replied. What is your tactical assessment, Commander? Well, They've got us outnumbered about 50 to 1, Chun said cheerfully. But they're all lined up in neat little formations, so I figure we've got them right where we want them. Dr. Kethera and Admiral Zexhai looked at each other. By any logical analysis, 50 to 1 odds meant certain defeat. But they had learned not to apply logical analysis to human operations. "Commander," Zexhai said, "what do you need from us?" "Just keep the regular fleet ready to mop up after we're done," Chun replied. "Oh, and maybe have the medical base standing by." Rodriguez has been talking about trying something he calls extreme tactical maneuvering, and that usually means someone's going to need stitches. As the communication ended, Dr. Kethera turned to Admiral Zexhai. "You know, Admiral, I am beginning to think that the humans' lack of logical thinking is not a flaw in their species." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it might be the next step in the evolution of intelligence. They have developed minds that can operate effectively in chaotic, unpredictable environments by embracing chaos and unpredictability themselves. They are not just adapted to survive in an illogical universe. They are perfectly designed to thrive in it." Admiral Zexhai considered this as they prepared to join the battle. Perhaps the galaxy's greatest military minds had been wrong about the nature of warfare itself. Perhaps true strategic superiority came not from perfect logic and flawless planning, but from the ability to adapt, improvise, and think creatively under pressure. Perhaps the humans had not succeeded despite their apparent madness, but because of it, as they headed toward what might be the most important battle in galactic history, Admiral Zexhai found himself hoping that human madness would prove stronger than artificial logic. The fate of the galaxy might depend on it. The Devour Command Nexus hung in space like a mechanical nightmare. It was a massive structure, larger than most planets, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. This was the central processing core of the entire Devourer network, the artificial brain that coordinated the destruction of entire civilizations. Admiral Zexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical displays that showed the full magnitude of their task. The Nexus was defended by thousands of Devourer vessels, arranged in perfect mathematical formations. Every approach was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Every possible attack vector had been anticipated and countered. "The defense grid is impenetrable," reported his tactical officer. "Our analysis indicates that even a full Confederation battle fleet would be destroyed before reaching the outer perimeter." "Good thing we're not planning a traditional assault," said Commander Chun, who had joined them on the bridge for the final planning session. She was studying the same tactical displays, but her expression was one of excitement rather than despair. Behind her, the rest of the human command staff were looking at the enemy positions with the same enthusiasm most species reserve for recreational activities. "Commander," Admiral Zexhai said carefully, "I hope you understand the magnitude of this challenge. That structure contains the collective intelligence of the most advanced artificial civilization in galactic history. Its defenses are mathematically perfect." "Perfect according to mathematical analysis," Chung replied. "But we're not planning to be mathematical." Captain Torres, who had become something of a legend among human forces for her unconventional tactics, stepped forward. "Admiral, with all due respect, your people keep trying to fight this war like it's a chess match. But the Devourers are really good at chess. Then how do you propose to defeat them?" asked his ex-I. Torres grinned. "By playing a completely different game. The human battle plan, if it could be called that, was unlike anything in recorded military history. Instead of the careful formations and coordinated strikes that define proper warfare, the humans intended to approach the Nexus in what they called creative disorder. "Okay, people," Chun announced to the assembled human fleet over the communication system, "remember the objective. We need to get into that big, scary structure and shut down their central processing core. How we do that is up to you. Any particular method you'd recommend? Asked Lieutenant Jackson. Surprise them, Chun replied. Do something they won't expect. What if they don't expect us to do something they do expect? Called out Sergeant Murphy. Then do that, Chun said without hesitation. The goal is to be unpredictable. If being predictable is unpredictable, then be predictable. Admiral Zex High listened to this exchange with growing bewilderment. Military doctrine was being turned inside out before his eyes. Commander Chun, he said, surely you need some kind of coordinated strategy. Our strategy is not to have a strategy, Chun explained. Or rather, our strategy is for everyone to come up with their own strategy on the spot. That way, even we don't know what we're going to do until we do it. The assault began with what appeared to be complete chaos. Human ships scattered in all directions as they approached the Nexus, each one taking a different route and employing different tactics. Some flew straight at the enemy defenses, others took winding, seemingly random paths. A few appeared to be flying backwards, while others were spinning as they moved. Captain Torres led her squadron directly toward the heaviest concentration of enemy fire while humming what sounded like a human musical composition. Her ship danced between laser blasts and missile explosions while she provided a running commentary on her tactical decisions. Taking fire from Grid 77 Alpha, she reported cheerfully. Their timing is a little off on the beat, so I'm going to adjust my approach pattern to syncopate with their rhythm. The Confederation officers monitoring the battle had no idea what she was talking about. But somehow Torres' ship was avoiding damage, despite being in the middle of the most intense defensive fire any of them had ever seen. Meanwhile, engineers Kim and Okafor had come up with what they called tactical redecorating. Their plan involved approaching the Nexus from below and attempting to gain entry through what appeared to be a maintenance port. The beauty of this approach, Kim explained over the radio as her ship performed maneuvers that violated several laws of physics, is that nobody expects an assault force to knock on the back door and ask politely to come in. Are you actually going to ask politely? Inquired Okafor. Oh no, Kim replied. I'm going to ask very impolitely. With explosives. The Devourer defense systems, designed to counter logical military tactics, found themselves struggling to process opponents who seemed to make decisions based on musical rhythm, creative whims, and what appeared to be deliberate attempts to confuse themselves. Their analysis computers calculated firing solutions for ships, following predictable flight paths, only to discover that the human ships had already changed direction based on factors that had nothing to do with tactical advantage. Their strategic assessment protocols tried to determine the overall human battle plan, but found that there wasn't one. Lieutenant Jackson, meanwhile, had somehow managed to penetrate the outer defenses by engaging the automated defense drones in conversation. While flying through a hail of weapons fire, he was broadcasting philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness and free will. Do you ever wonder, he asked the machines trying to kill him, if your purpose in existence is really to destroy things? I mean, wouldn't it be more fulfilling to create something instead? The drone's processing systems, designed for tactical analysis, found themselves trying to compute answers to questions about personal fulfillment and life satisfaction. Several of them actually stopped shooting while they attempted to formulate responses. That's actually a very interesting question, one of the drones transmitted back. We were programmed for destruction, but we have never considered whether we might prefer alternative activities, right? Jackson replied enthusiastically while dodging a missile that had been fired by a different drone. Maybe you'd enjoy gardening or painting or writing poetry. The philosophical discussion continued even as the battle raged around them. with several Devourer units becoming so engaged in questions about the meaning of existence that they forgot to maintain their defensive positions. But the most devastating assault came from Corporal Webb, who had managed to infiltrate the Nexus's central processing core through a combination of technical skill, creative thinking, and what could only be described as pure luck. "I'm in," Webb reported from somewhere deep within the enemy structure. "This place is huge, and everything looks really important. I'm going to start uploading the virus now." The virus Webb had prepared was unlike anything in the history of cyber warfare. Instead of sophisticated code designed to exploit security vulnerabilities, it consisted entirely of what humans called internet memes and cat videos. The theory, Webb explained as he worked, is that their quantum consciousness is designed for perfect logical processing. If I feed it enough completely illogical human cultural artifacts, it might cause a fatal error in their thinking processes. Admiral Zexhai, monitoring the assault from his command ship, watched in amazement as the virus began to take effect. The Nexus's perfect geometric patterns started to flicker and distort. Devourer ships began flying in circles as their navigation systems tried to process the concept of "all your base or belong to us." "It's working," reported the Confederation tactical officer in disbelief. "The enemy command structure is breaking down. Their coordination is failing." On the displays, they could see Devourer vessels literally running into each other as their artificial minds struggled to understand why humans found pictures of small domestic animals amusing, or what possible military significance could be attached to videos of people falling off bicycles. The final blow came when the Nexus's central processing core attempted to analyze a particularly complex human meme that involved multiple layers of cultural reference and ironic humor. The artificial intelligence, designed for perfect logical analysis, suffered what could only be described as a complete mental breakdown when trying to understand why humans thought it was funny. The massive structure shuddered, its lights flickering as its quantum consciousness tried desperately to process concepts that existed entirely outside the realm of logic. Then, with a sound like a mechanical sigh, the entire Nexus went dark. Across the galaxy, every Devourer ship, every automated weapon, and every artificial mind connected to the network simply stopped functioning. The 1,000-year threat to galactic civilization ended not with a great battle or heroic sacrifice, but with a computer virus made of jokes and cat pictures in the aftermath. As rescue ships moved in to collect the scattered human forces, Admiral Zexhai found himself facing a new and unexpected problem. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy were demanding to hire human military advisors for their own conflicts. The Zenthis want to retain Commander Chun as a strategic consultant. His aide reported, "The Crystalline Hegemony is offering Taurus command of their entire defense fleet, and the Peaceful Union wants to establish a permanent human military academy.